Hello and welcome back. In this video, I'll be looking at the issue of executing prisoners in Islam. When ISIS brings us gruesome videos executing prisoners, usually by beheading, we tend to see many apologists for Islam claim that the religion forbids the killing of unarmed prisoners of war. One of the most shocking crimes of Islamic State since they have come to prominence was their massacre on June 12, 2014 of over 1,500 Iraqis in Camp Speicher. Those massacred were largely Shia Muslims from southern Iraq, killed at the hands of Salafist Sunnis in ISIS. We saw images of these Air Force cadets being led in long queues to face large-scale summary executions, with their bodies being dumped into the Tigris River. So, is there any precedent in Islamic history that showed us captured prisoners can be executed? Not surprisingly, once again, there is. We glanced briefly at the story of Banu Qurayza to show that there was a strong precedent for mass enslavement, and we also understood that the men of the tribe were killed after their surrender. The number of prisoners beheaded by Mohammed's army varies from 600 to 900. Let's read page 464 of the biography of Mohammed, where we hear about an ally of Mohammed called Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh deciding the judgment on the Jews of Banu Qurayza. Mohammed had appointed Sa'ad as judge after the Aus tribe of Muslims had begged Mohammed to be lenient in his sentence. Sa'ad said, "Then I give judgment that the men should be killed, the property divided, and the women and children taken as captives." The apostle said to Sa'ad, "You have given the judgment of Allah above the 7 heavens." Then they surrendered, and the apostle confined them in Medina, in the quarter of daughter of Al-Harith, a woman of Banu Najjar. Then the apostle went out to the market of Medina, which is still its market today, and dug trenches in it. Then he sent for them and struck off their heads in those trenches as they were brought out to him in batches. Among them was the enemy of Allah, Huyay ibn Akhtab, and Ka'ab ibn Asad, their chief. There were 600 or 700 in all, though some put the figure as high as 800 or 900. So the argument that Muslims are not allowed to kill prisoners of war is already debunked. We know that Mohammed beheaded at least 600 prisoners after they had all surrendered, and he executed them in the market of the city. Imagine for a second if ISIS produce a video with mass beheading on a similar scale, one after the other. At least 600 men and teenage boys and 1 woman. That's exactly what the Muslims did to this Jewish tribe. Then ISIS post this video online and we're all outraged at the beheading of 600 people in just a single day. How many nothing to do with Islams will we hear, despite it having an exact precedent in Islamic history of an event that was entirely overseen by Mohammed, the religion's founder? Many Muslims will claim that Banu Qurayza had broken an agreement and deserved this punishment, but this is clearly ludicrous. No evidence from Muslim sources shows the Jews had signed up to anything that they later went against. But even if we accept that proposition, then by those standards, the Muslims had broken a number of treaties too, like that of Hudaybiyah and the raid of Safwan, when Muslims killed non-Muslims during the sacred months. So would Muslims have accepted it as fair if all the Muslim men and pubescent boys were beheaded and all their women and children enslaved because some of them had broken a treaty? Would they really have said it was just if they were in the shoes of the Jews? The story of this massacre is also mentioned in the Quran, in chapter 33 verses 26 and 27, albeit very briefly and without directly mentioning the name of the tribe involved. "And he brought down from their strongholds those of the people of the book who backed them. He threw terror into their hearts. Some of them you killed and others you took captive. And he made you inherit their land and their homes and their possessions, and a region you have never stepped on. God has power over all things." The Muslims conveniently needed these homes, and Mohammed gave these homes exclusively to the migrants who had arrived from Mecca and had until then been staying as guests in the homes of Medina's Muslims. Moving on, the first major battle in Islam occurred near the wells of Badr. The Muslims had gone out to attack Meccan trade caravans belonging to the pagans so they could loot their goods. The Meccans had heard of this plan and sent out an army to defend their caravan. Ultimately, however, the Muslims won this battle and captured a number of prisoners. So how did they treat them? We read page 303 of the biography of Mohammed and see what happened with 2 prisoners. A little background on this. One of Mohammed's fighters, Abdurrahman ibn Auf, tells us how he had captured one of the senior polytheists of Mecca, Umayyah, and his son. As Abdurrahman was leading his prisoners away, some Muslims, led by Bilal, wanted to kill these prisoners. As soon as he saw him, he said, "The arch-infidel Umayyah ibn Khalaf, may I not live if he lives?" I said, "Would you attack my prisoners?" But he kept crying out these words in spite of my remonstrances, until finally he shouted at the top of his voice, "O God's helpers, the arch-infidel Umayyah ibn Khalaf, may I not live if he lives?" The people formed a ring around us as I was protecting him. Then a man drew his sword and cut off his son's foot so that he fell down, and Umayyah let out a cry such as I have never heard. And I said to him, make your escape, though he had no chance of escape. I can do nothing for you. They hewed them to pieces with their swords until they were dead. Abdurrahman used to say, God have mercy on Bilal. I lost my coats of mail and he deprived me of my prisoners. So here what we had was two prisoners who were being led away by their captor, and the Muslims surround them and chop them to pieces with their swords. This is all happening in front of Mohammed as he was present at the battle, and we hear nothing about him rebuking any of them for killing these prisoners in such a barbaric way. Imagine for a second someone being dragged as a prisoner and then a group of Muslims with swords chop these prisoners to pieces. If ISIS were to chop up prisoners with their swords, we'd hear apologists claim that their actions had nothing to do with Islam. A few pages later, we hear about the execution of another two prisoners. Then the apostle began his return journey to Medina with the unbelieving prisoners, among whom were Uqba ibn Abu Mu'ayt and An-Nadhr ibn al-Harith. The apostle carried with him the booty that had been taken from the polytheists and put Abdullah ibn Ka'b in charge of it. When the apostle was in As-Safra, An-Nadhr was killed by Ali, as a learned Meccan told me. When he was in Urq al-Dhabya, Uqba was killed. He had been captured by Abdullah ibn Salama, one of the Bani al-Ajlan. When the apostle ordered him to be killed, Uqba said, "But who will look after my children, O Mohammed?" "Hell," he said. And Asim ibn Thabit ibn Abu al-Aql al-Ansari killed him. After killing a number of prisoners as we've just read, Mohammed asked for advice on what to do with the rest. We read in the commentary of Ibn Kathir for chapter 8 verse 67, he says, "The Prophet of Allah asked the people for their opinion about the prisoners of war of Badr. Umar ibn al-Khattab stood up and said, 'O Allah's Messenger, cut off their necks.'" So this is the third highest ranked Muslim, according to mainstream Sunni Islam, who asks Mohammed to cut their heads off. Umar had a reputation of being ruthless. He is admired by Sunni Muslims, but hated by Shia Muslims. Anyway, Abu Bakr, who was the man who succeeded Muhammad after his death, suggested they do something else. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq stood up and said, "O Allah's Messenger, I think you should pardon them and set them free in return for ransom." So Muhammad takes the opinion of Abu Bakr and holds the prisoners as hostages, releasing them only after they paid the Muslims ransom money. You'd think he took the more humane decision there by ignoring Umar's request to have them all killed, but apparently not. Well, at least not by Allah's standards. The author of the Quran reveals this verse. "It is not for any prophet to have captives until he hath made slaughter in the land." It appears that Allah didn't like the fact that they exchanged the prisoners for ransom money, preferring instead if they had killed the prisoners, just like bloodthirsty Umar suggested. This is confirmed in the Reasons of Revelations for this verse, a text called Asbab al-Nuzul. "It is not for any prophet to have captives until he hath made slaughter in the land." Said Mujahid, "It happened that some of that which was revealed from heaven agreed with many of Umar's opinions. When the Messenger of Allah, Allah bless him and give him peace, consulted the Muslims about the prisoners of Badr, they said, 'O Messenger of Allah, they are your cousins, so free them in exchange for a ransom.' Umar ibn al-Khattab said, 'No, O Messenger of Allah, you should kill them.' Then this verse was revealed. So here we have the author of the Quran saying that Muslims should, I repeat, should have killed the prisoners of war. So what is the scholarly opinion on prisoners of war? Well, going back to Ibn Kathir, we see what the opinion of Muslim scholars is on this issue, given all the evidence we've seen. The majority of the scholars say that the matter of prisoners of war is up to the Imam. If he decides, he can have them killed, such as in the case of the Banu Qurayza. If he decides, he can accept a ransom for them, as in the case of the prisoners of Badr, or exchange them for Muslim prisoners. The messenger exchanged a woman and her daughter who were captured by Salama ibn al-Aqwa for exchange of some Muslims who were captured by the idolaters. Or, if he decides, he can take the prisoner as a captive. In that last sentence there, taking the prisoner as a captive is to enslave a prisoner, not just detain them. This is what it says in the original Arabic, وَإِنْ شَاءَ اسْتَرَقَ مَنْ أَسَرَ. But they've softened it down a little in the translation. So, it's pretty obvious now that those who claim ISIS are un-Islamic when they execute prisoners are either ignorant or misinformed or simply lying. As we read, amid countless examples, that Mohammed, according to his most trusted biography written by Muslims themselves, killed all the men of a single tribe, estimated to be between 600 and 900. At the lowest estimate, if Mohammed was beheading these people at the rate of one prisoner every 5 seconds, they'd take at least 50 minutes to finish off the job. Just imagine watching a video where a person is beheaded every 5 seconds for nearly an entire hour, and then closing the video and walking off, telling everyone that these people are the best people to have walked this earth, and they gave us the best, most peaceful religion ever. The issue is clear as day. In the next episode, we'll take a look at beheadings as a form of execution, something that's already been proven in this video, but we'll go into more detail. And also the issue of mutilating the dead. Please share this video where you can. Thank you for watching and see you soon.